On a summer morning in 1927, the Black Hills of South Dakota were still wild and mostly empty. The only sounds were the wind sweeping through the pines and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. Most Americans had never heard of this remote corner of the country. They certainly did not know about a 6,000-foot granite peak that local people called the Six Grandfathers. That mountain was about to change the world, but it would never have happened without a road. The man behind the dream was a sculptor named Gutzon Borglum. He was a bold, stubborn artist who had already carved the face of Robert E. Lee into Stone Mountain in Georgia. But that project had ended in conflict, and Borglum was looking for something bigger. He wanted to carve an entire mountain into a monument that would tell the story of America's founding. He chose the Black Hills because the rock was hard and the face of the mountain faced southeast, which meant it caught the sun for most of the day. He also wanted a place that was dramatic, remote, and almost impossible to reach. In 1924, Borglum climbed up the side of the Six Grandfathers and stood on its summit. He looked out over a sea of ponderosa pines and rugged granite spires. He was certain that this was the place, but there was one enormous problem. Nobody could get there. The nearest town was Keystone, a small mining village of about 500 people. The trail from Keystone to the mountain was nothing more than a wagon path used by miners and homesteaders. It was narrow, rocky, and often impassable after rain. If Borglum wanted to bring in workers, supplies, dynamite, and eventually tourists, he needed a real road. So the story of Mount Rushmore is really the story of that road. The road is what made the monument possible. It is what brought the workers every day, what carried the drills and the compressors and the tons of rock that had to be hauled away. And later, it was the road that brought the millions of visitors who turned a giant carving into a national icon. Without the road, the mountain would have stayed a mountain. The faces of 4 presidents would have existed only in Borglum's imagination. The first step was asking the state of South Dakota for help. In 1925, Borglum convinced Governor Carl Gunderson to support the project. The state legislature approved a small amount of money, but it was not nearly enough for a proper road. Borglum had to raise funds from private donors and from the federal government. He was persistent and persuasive. He talked about patriotism, about creating a monument that would draw travelers from all over the world. He made it sound like a pilgrimage site, not just a sculpture. And he was right, but first the road had to be built. In the spring of 1927, crews began clearing the path. They used dynamite to blast away boulders and tree stumps. They dug out a rough track wide enough for a single truck. The work was dangerous. Men swung pickaxes on steep slopes. Horses hauled wagons loaded with supplies. There was no machinery to speak of, just muscle and grit. The road followed a creek bed up the mountain, winding through tight switchbacks. It was a long 3 miles from Keystone to the base of the mountain. But when the road was finished, it was barely more than a dirt lane. It turned to mud when it rained and turned to dust when it was dry. Nevertheless, on August 10, 1927, Gutzon Borglum climbed into the bucket of a steam shovel and was hoisted up the mountain. A crowd of local people gathered at the base. They had come on foot, on horseback, and in a few rattling automobiles. The road was still rough, but it was passable. President Calvin Coolidge had been invited, but he declined. He sent a telegram instead, so Borglum stood on the mountain with a drill in his hand. He drilled a hole, packed it with dynamite, and lit the fuse. The explosion sent a shower of granite into the air. The carving had begun, but the road was not finished. It was just a start. As the months went by, the workers needed a better way to get up the mountain. The original dirt road was too narrow for the heavy equipment. The trucks that carried steel cables and air compressors kept getting stuck. Borglum had to beg the state for more money. He argued that the road was not just for the carving, it was for the future of South Dakota. Tourists would come, he said, and they would spend money in towns like Keystone and Rapid City. The state listened. In 1929, the South Dakota Highway Commission agreed to build a proper all-weather road. The new road was a major engineering project. It had to be cut into the side of the mountain, climbing over 1,000 feet in elevation. The workers used dynamite to break the rock, then used mules and wagons to haul the debris away. They built culverts to drain rainwater. They graded the surface with crushed rock. It took 2 years to finish. By the summer of 1931, the road was finally paved with a layer of gravel and tar. It was still only 2 lanes wide with no guardrails, but it was solid. A car could drive from Keystone to the base of Mount Rushmore in about 15 minutes. The road changed everything. Before the road, the workers had to live in tents near the mountain. They hiked up every morning. The road allowed them to commute from Keystone or even Rapid City. Families moved into the area. A small community of workers and their families grew up at the foot of the mountain. There was a mess hall, a bunkhouse, and a blacksmith shop. The road also brought supplies. Every nail, every stick of dynamite, every bag of cement had to come up that road. The road was the lifeline of the entire project, but the road did not just serve the workers. It also began to attract visitors. Even while the carving was barely begun, people wanted to see what was happening. In 1930, only a few hundred curious souls made the bumpy drive to the site. By 1934, after the face of George Washington had been completed, the number jumped to over 10,000. The road was still rough, but it was passable. And those early visitors spread the word. They told their friends about the enormous faces emerging from the granite. They wrote letters and sent postcards. The road was the artery that fed the legend. One of the biggest turning points came in 1935. The federal government, now deeply involved in the project through the National Park Service, decided to improve the road again. They wanted to make Mount Rushmore a destination for the new automobile tourism that was sweeping America. The Great Depression had made people eager for inexpensive travel. A family could pack up their car and drive to the Black Hills for a vacation, but they needed good roads. So the Park Service and the state of South Dakota teamed up to build a brand new highway. This highway was called the Mount Rushmore Road. It was a modern, paved, two-lane road that connected directly to U.S. Highway 16, the main route through the Black Hills. The new road was wide enough for buses. It had gentle curves and a smooth surface. It was designed for the average driver, not just for work trucks. When it opened in 1937, it transformed Mount Rushmore from a remote curiosity into a national attraction. That summer, nearly 50,000 people drove up the new road. They parked their cars in a dirt lot and walked to a viewing platform. They stared up at the faces of Washington, Jefferson, and the partially finished Lincoln. They bought souvenirs. They took pictures. They told the world. The road also brought reporters and photographers. National magazines like National Geographic and Life ran stories about the monument. Movie newsreels showed the dynamite blasts and the workers dangling from ropes. All of that coverage was made possible by the road. Without it, the journalists would have had to hike for miles. With the road, they could drive right up to the base. The road turned Mount Rushmore into a media sensation. By the time the carving was finished in 1941, the road was already famous in its own right. Drivers came from all over the country just to experience the approach. The road wound through the Black Hills, passing forests and granite spires. It crossed streams and climbed ridges. Every curve revealed a new view. The road itself became part of the experience. Today, that road is known as the Peter Norbeck Scenic Byway, named after the South Dakota senator who helped create it. But in the early days, it was simply the road that made Mount Rushmore famous. Consider what happened after the monument was completed. World War II slowed tourism, but when the war ended, Americans took to the highways in unprecedented numbers. The interstate highway system was still a decade away. But the Mount Rushmore Road was already there, ready to welcome the flood of travelers. In the 1950s, the number of visitors soared past 1 million a year. The road had to be widened and improved several times, but the path never changed. It still followed the same route that the workers had carved out in the 1920s. The road also shaped the town of Keystone. Before the monument, Keystone was a struggling mining town. The mines were closing and the town was dying. But when the road brought tourists, Keystone reinvented itself as a gateway to Rushmore. Motels, restaurants, and souvenir shops sprang up along the road. The town boomed. Without the road, Keystone would have become a ghost town. Instead, it became a bustling tourist stop. The story of the road is also the story of the workers. They were the men who blasted the rock and laid the pavement. Many of them were unemployed miners or farmers who had lost their land during the Depression. They worked for $30 to $40 a week, which was decent pay at the time, but the work was dangerous. There were accidents on the road construction site, just as there were on the mountain itself. Rocks fell, trucks rolled, men were injured, a few died. The road was built with sweat and sacrifice. But the workers also felt a deep pride. They knew they were part of something historic. When the road was finished, they drove their families up to see the monument. They pointed to the faces and said, "I helped build that road. Without me, you couldn't be here." The road was more than asphalt and gravel. It was a symbol of human determination. Today, visitors to Mount Rushmore follow the same road that was cut into the hills almost a century ago. They drive up the winding highway, past the forests and the meadows. They see the mountain appear in the distance, then grow larger with every mile. When they finally park and step out, they are standing where the workers once stood. They are looking at the same faces that have watched over the Black Hills since the 1940s, and they are traveling the same road that made it all possible. The road that made Mount Rushmore famous did not just carry cars and buses. It carried hope. it carried a vision. It carried the determination of a stubborn artist, a handful of politicians, and hundreds of ordinary men who believed that a mountain could become a monument. The road was the thread that connected the dream to the reality. Without it, the dream would have stayed in the clouds, but the road brought it down to earth. And so, as we continue this story, we will go deeper into the construction of that road. We will meet the men who built it. We will learn about the decisions that shaped it. And we will see how a simple dirt track turned a remote mountain into one of the most famous landmarks in the world. The road is not just a way to get there. It is the reason we can get there at all. The road that made Mount Rushmore famous did not just carry cars and buses. It carried hope. It carried a vision. It carried the determination of a stubborn artist, a handful of politicians, and hundreds of ordinary men who believed that a mountain could become a monument. The road was the thread that connected the dream to the reality. Without it, the dream would have stayed in the clouds, but the road brought it down to earth. And so, as we continue this story, we will go deeper into the construction of that road. We will meet the men who built it. We will learn about the decisions that shaped it. And we will see how a simple dirt track turned a remote mountain into one of the most famous landmarks in the world. The road is not just a way to get there. It is the reason we can get there at all. But before we talk about the road itself, we have to understand the man who fought for it. His name was Peter Norbeck, and he was a senator from South Dakota. Norbeck was not a typical politician. He was a farmer, a businessman, and a conservationist. He loved the Black Hills with a passion that bordered on obsession. He had grown up in the region, and he knew every canyon, every stream, every granite outcropping. He had a vision not just for Mount Rushmore, but for a whole network of roads that would open up the Black Hills to the American people. In the 180s, most of the roads in the region were little more than wagon trails. They were rutted, muddy, and often impassable. Norbeck wanted to change that. He pushed for federal funding to build scenic highways that would wind through the hills, offering views of the forests and the rock formations. He believed that if people could see the beauty of the Black Hills, they would come to love them as he did, and when they loved them, they would protect them. Norbeck was the driving force behind the Mount Rushmore Road, but he was not alone. He had allies in the South Dakota State Legislature, in the National Park Service, and in the office of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Great Depression had brought the nation to its knees, but it had also created an opportunity. The federal government was pouring money into infrastructure projects to put people back to work. Norbeck seized that opportunity. He argued that building a road to Mount Rushmore would create jobs, boost tourism, and bring national attention to the monument. His arguments were persuasive. In 1934, Congress approved funding for the road, and the project was put under the supervision of the Bureau of Public Roads. The Bureau of Public Roads was no ordinary government agency. It was staffed by engineers who had built highways across the American West. They knew how to blast through mountains, how to lay pavement on steep slopes, and how to design curves that would be safe for drivers. The chief engineer for the Mount Rushmore Road was a man named Thomas H. MacDonald. MacDonald was a legendary figure in road building. He had overseen the construction of the Lincoln Highway and the development of the federal highway system. He was known for his attention to detail and his insistence on quality. For MacDonald, the Mount Rushmore Road was not just a road. It was a showcase for American engineering. The surveys began in the summer of 1934. Surveyors hiked through the woods, carrying tripods and chains. They mapped the terrain, noting the elevation changes and the rock formations. They calculated the grades and the curves. Their goal was to create a road that would be both scenic and safe. They wanted drivers to feel like they were gliding through the forest, not fighting the steering wheel. But the Black Hills were not cooperative. The land was rugged, filled with granite boulders and steep ravines. The surveyors had to find a route that avoided the worst of the obstacles while still offering dramatic views of the mountain. It took them nearly a year to finalize the alignment. Once the route was chosen, the real work began. The construction crew was a mix of local men and out-of-work laborers from across the Midwest. They were paid by the hour, usually about 50 cents an hour for a 12-hour day. That was good money during the Depression, but it came with a price. The work was brutal. They had to clear trees, dig out stumps, and move thousands of tons of rock. They used dynamite to blast away the granite ledges. The blast shook the ground and sent shards of rock flying into the air. The men wore no hard hats. They had no safety harnesses. They worked with their hands and their backs, and they took risks that would be unthinkable today. One of the most dangerous tasks was building the retaining walls. The road had to cut into the side of the hills, and in many places the slope was so steep that the road would have crumbled without support. The workers built walls out of dry-laid stone, stacking granite blocks without mortar. Each block had to be fitted by hand, chiseled and shaped to match the ones around it. It was slow work, painstaking and exhausting. A single wall could take weeks to complete, but the walls were beautiful, too. They blended into the landscape, looking like natural outcrops rather than man-made structures. That was intentional. Norbeck had insisted that the road should not mar the scenery. It should enhance it. The road also required bridges. There were several streams that crossed the route, and in the spring, the runoff could turn them into raging torrents. The engineers designed simple, elegant stone bridges that would last for generations. They used local granite for the abutments and concrete for the decks. The bridges were low and unobtrusive, designed to let the water flow underneath without creating a bottleneck. When the road was finished, the bridges were almost invisible, hidden by the trees and the undergrowth. By 1935, the road was beginning to take shape. The grading was complete and the surface was being prepared. The workers laid a base of crushed stone, then topped it with a layer of gravel mixed with tar. The tar came from refineries in Wyoming, hauled in by trucks that had to navigate the same rough roads they were trying to replace. The mix was called tarmac, a primitive form of asphalt. It was hot and sticky, and the men had to spread it with rakes and shovels. They worked in the summer heat, sweating under the South Dakota sun. The tar fumes made them dizzy, but they kept going because they knew that every yard of pavement brought the road closer to completion. The road was officially opened in the summer of 1936, though it was not fully paved until the following year. The opening was a big event. Governor Tom Barry of South Dakota came to cut the ribbon. Senator Norbeck gave a speech. A crowd of several hundred people gathered at the base of the mountain to celebrate. They drove up the new road in their Model TS and Chevys, honking their horns and waving. The road was smooth and wide, with gentle curves that made the drive feel like a pleasure cruise. For the first time, ordinary people could drive to Mount Rushmore without fear of breaking an axle or getting stuck in the mud. But the road was not just a means of access. It was also a destination in itself. Norbeck had designed the route to offer panoramic views of the Black Hills. At several points along the way, there were pullouts where drivers could stop and step out to take pictures. One of those pullouts, called the Norbeck Overlook, offered a stunning view of Mount Rushmore from a distance. The faces of the presidents seemed to emerge from the granite like ghosts, growing larger as the road approached. Norbeck had planned that effect carefully. He wanted visitors to feel a sense of anticipation, a growing wonder as they got closer to the monument. The road was a story told in curves and gradients, each mile building toward the climax. The road also brought unexpected consequences. One of the most significant was the transformation of the nearby town of Custer. Custer was the county seat, and it was located about 20 miles south of Mount Rushmore. Before the road, Custer was a sleepy little town with a few stores and a hotel. But when the road opened, Custer became a hub for tourists. They stopped there to fill up their gas tanks, buy groceries, and find a place to sleep. Motels sprung up overnight, along with diners and souvenir stands. The population of Custer doubled within 5 years. The town owed its boom to the road. The road also changed the way people thought about the monument. Before the road, Mount Rushmore was a local project, a curiosity for the people of South Dakota. After the road, it became a national symbol. The first major wave of visitors came in 1937, when the road was fully paved. That year, more than 50,000 people drove up the new highway. They parked in a lot that had been carved out of the hillside, then walked to a viewing platform that offered a clear view of the carving. At that time, only 3 faces were complete: Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln. Theodore Roosevelt was still a rough block of granite, but that did not matter. The visitors were awestruck. They stood in silence, staring up at the colossal heads. They took pictures with their box cameras. They bought postcards and souvenirs from a small concession stand. They left with memories that would last a lifetime. The road also attracted the attention of the national media. In 1938, Life magazine sent a photographer to document the monument and the road. The photographs showed the road winding through the forest, the workers hanging from ropes on the mountain, the faces emerging from the rock. The article called Mount Rushmore the 8th wonder of the world. It was an exaggeration, but it captured the public imagination. People who had never heard of the Black Hills now wanted to see them, and they knew they could drive there, thanks to the new road. The road continued to be upgraded over the years. In the 1940s, the tar and gravel surface was replaced with a modern asphalt pavement. In the 1950s, the road was widened to 3 lanes in some sections, allowing for safer passing. In the 1960s, guardrails were installed along the steepest stretches, but the basic route never changed. It still followed the path that Norbeck and the surveyors had chosen in the 193's rows. The road was a living piece of history, a monument in its own right. One of the lesser-known stories about the road is the role it played during World War II. When the United States entered the war in 1941, the carving at Mount Rushmore was nearly complete, but tourism came to a halt. Gasoline was rationed and rubber was scarce. People could not drive for pleasure. The road fell quiet. The only traffic was from military vehicles and the occasional maintenance crew, but the road remained open, a silent witness to the war. After the war ended, the road came back to life. Veterans returned home, married, started families, and bought cars. They wanted to see America, and they drove the road that Norbeck built. The road also faced challenges from nature. Every winter, snow and ice made the road treacherous. The state had to send snowplows to clear it, sometimes working through the night to keep the road open. In the spring, runoff from the melting snow would wash out the shoulders and erode the pavement. The maintenance crew had to repair the damage every year, but they did it because they knew how important the road was to the local economy. In the 1970s, the road was officially designated as the Peter Norbeck Scenic Byway, honoring the man who had championed it. The designation brought new funding for preservation and improvements. New signs were installed, explaining the history of the road and the monument. Pullouts were expanded to accommodate larger vehicles. The road became a destination for motorcycle riders who loved the curves and the views. Today, the Norbeck Scenic Byway is one of the most popular drives in the United States, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. But the road is more than a scenic drive. It is a testament to the power of human vision. When Peter Norbeck looked at the Black Hills, he saw not just rocks and trees, but a place where people could find inspiration. He believed that a good road could change the way people saw the world, and he was right. Every year, families from every state and from countries around the globe drive that road. They come expecting to see a monument, but they leave having experienced a journey. The road is the beginning of the story, the first chapter of a memory that will last a lifetime, and the road is still evolving. In the 21st century, the National Park Service and the state of South Dakota have invested millions of dollars in improvements. New parking lots, new visitor centers, and new interpretive exhibits have been built along the road, but the character of the road remains the same. It is still a winding, two-lane highway that climbs through the forest. It still has that same sense of anticipation, that same thrill as the mountain appears in the distance. It is still the road that made Mount Rushmore famous. As we look back on the story, we see that the road was never just a practical necessity. It was a symbol of the American spirit. It was built during the hardest of times, by men who had little but their determination. It was paid for by a nation that believed in the future. And it carried the dreams of an artist who wanted to carve a mountain and a senator who wanted to share that mountain with the world. The road is the silent partner in the Mount Rushmore story, the unsung hero that made everything possible. So the next time you drive up that winding highway, take a moment to appreciate the road itself. Look at the stone walls, the bridges, the gentle curves. Think about the men who built it, who blasted the rock and spread the tar. Think about Peter Norbeck, who fought for it in the halls of Congress. And think about all the travelers who have come before you, driving that same road, seeing that same view. The road is not just a way to get there. It is the reason we can get there at all. And it will carry generations yet unborn to the mountain that became a monument, the road that made it famous, and the dream that still stands tall against the sky. But the road's story did not end there. It continued to evolve, as all great stories do, with new layers of meaning added by each generation of travelers. The road that Peter Norbeck had envisioned as a gateway to a national treasure soon became something more, a thread connecting the past to the present, a ribbon of asphalt that carried the hopes and memories of millions. One of the most remarkable chapters in the road's history unfolded in the summer of 1941, when the carving at Mount Rushmore was finally declared complete. The last of the dynamite had been detonated, the final touches of the jackhammer had been applied, and the faces of Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt stood finished against the sky. But the celebration was muted. The world was at war, and the monument itself seemed to take on a new meaning. It became a symbol of the democracy that the United States was fighting to defend. And the road that led to it became a pilgrimage route for soldiers on leave, for families saying goodbye, for a nation searching for inspiration. In those wartime years, the road was used for more than just tourism. The military commandeered the parking lot as a staging area for convoys heading to training camps in the West. The local Civil Air Patrol used the viewing platform as a lookout post, scanning the skies for enemy aircraft that never came. And the road itself was patrolled by the State Highway Patrol, ensuring that no saboteurs could disrupt the flow of traffic. The road was a lifeline, a link between the quiet hills and the distant battlefields. After the war, the road experienced a second birth. The summer of 1946 saw the first great wave of peacetime travelers. Men who had fought in Europe and the Pacific came home with a new appreciation for the landscapes of their own country. They packed their families into station wagons and headed west. The road to Mount Rushmore became a destination for these veterans, a place to show their children what America had built. They drove the winding highway with a sense of wonder, pointing out the deer that crossed the road, the rock formations that looked like faces, the sudden glimpse of the monument that made their hearts skip a beat. One such veteran was a man named Frank Thompson from Iowa. He had served as a medic in the Battle of the Bulge. After the war, he married his sweetheart, bought a used Chevrolet, and drove to the Black Hills. He later wrote a letter to the local newspaper describing his experience. "We started up that road early in the morning. The sun was just coming over the hills. My wife and I were talking about the war, about the friends we had lost. Then we came around a bend and saw the monument. It was like a sign from heaven. We pulled over and just sat there, holding hands. That road made me feel like I had come home." Stories like Frank's were repeated 1,000 times. The road became a place of healing, a place where people could leave their worries behind and find something larger than themselves. And the road itself seemed to absorb those emotions, carrying them forward through the years. Every curve held a memory, every straightaway a promise. The road also continued to shape the economy of the region. In the 1950s, the town of Custer was no longer the only beneficiary. New businesses sprang up along the entire route. Gas stations, motels, and souvenir shops lined the highway, each vying for the attention of the passing motorist. One of the most famous of these was the Snake Pit, a roadside attraction that featured a pit full of rattlesnakes. Travelers would stop to watch the handlers milk the venom, shivering with a mix of fear and excitement. The Snake Pit was not for everyone, but it was a sign of the road's growing popularity. It was a place where the road itself became the attraction. Further up the highway, a family of homesteaders named the Schmidts opened a small restaurant called the Mountain View Cafe. Mrs. Schmidt made pies from wild chokecherries that grew along the road. Her husband, a former miner, told stories about the carving days. The cafe became a favorite stop for tourists who would sit at the counter and listen to the old man talk about the dynamite blasts and the rope ladders. The Schmidts never got rich, but they raised 5 children on the income from the road. The road was their livelihood, their connection to the world. By the 1960s, the road was carrying more than 500,000 visitors a year. The National Park Service began to worry about the impact of so many cars on the fragile environment. Pollution from exhaust fumes was staining the granite faces. Noise of engines disturbed the wildlife, and the road itself was showing signs of wear. The asphalt cracked under the weight of the RVs and tour buses. The shoulders crumbled. The state of South Dakota responded with a massive rebuilding project in 1968, widening the road and adding guardrails, but the character of the road remained intact. The surveyors worked carefully to preserve the original sightlines that Norbeck had insisted upon. They planted new trees to replace those that had been removed. They installed drainage systems to prevent erosion. The road was modernized, but it was not destroyed. The 1970s brought a new challenge, the energy crisis. Gasoline prices soared and long-distance driving became a luxury. The number of visitors to Mount Rushmore dropped sharply. The road, which had been so busy in the summer, now saw only a trickle of traffic. The businesses along the route struggled. The Snake Pit closed its doors, and the Mountain View Cafe was sold to a chain. But the road itself remained open. The state kept it plowed and maintained, even when the parking lot at the monument was nearly empty. They knew that the road was a symbol, and that symbols could not be abandoned. The road's fortunes revived in the 1980s, with the rise of the family vacation and the minivan. A new generation of travelers discovered the road. They came from Japan, from Germany, from Australia. They had seen pictures of Mount Rushmore in movies and magazines, and they wanted to see it with their own eyes. The road became a global destination. The state added interpretive signs in multiple languages. The parking lot was expanded again, and the road itself was designated as part of the National Scenic Byway Program, a status that brought federal dollars for preservation. But the road was more than a tourist attraction. It was a living museum of engineering. The stone walls that lined the road were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. Those walls still stand today, a testament to the work of young men who had nothing but their hands and their pride. The bridges that crossed the streams were designed in the rustic style of the National Park Service, with railings made of rough-hewn logs. Every mile of the road told a story of craftsmanship and care. One of the most iconic features of the road is the Norbeck Overlook, the pullout that offers the first glimpse of Mount Rushmore. That overlook was carefully sited to give visitors the maximum dramatic effect. The road approaches from the east, winding through a dense forest of ponderosa pine. Then, at a precise point, the trees part and the mountain appears, huge and impossible. The engineers who designed that pullout studied the angle of the sunlight, the curve of the hillside, the growth of the trees. They wanted the first view to be breathtaking, and it is. Travelers who stop there often describe the experience as spiritual. They say that the sight of the presidents emerging from the rock makes them feel small and yet connected to something great. The road also has a darker history, one that is less often told. The land on which the road was built belonged to the Lakota Sioux, who considered the Black Hills sacred. The 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie had guaranteed their ownership of the land, but the discovery of gold in the 1870s led to a flood of white settlers. The United States government forced the Sioux to cede the Black Hills in 1877, a violation of the treaty that has never been fully resolved. For the Lakota, the road to Mount Rushmore is a symbol of loss, a reminder of a broken promise. In the 1970s, members of the American Indian movement staged protests at the monument, demanding the return of the land. They stood on the viewing platform, holding signs that read, "Our sacred land is not for sale." The road carried those protesters, just as it had carried the tourists. Today, the road is a site of reconciliation as well as celebration. Interpretive signs now acknowledge the history of the Black Hills as a sacred place for the Lakota people. The National Park Service has worked with tribal leaders to develop programs that tell the other side of the story. Visitors can learn about the Lakota culture, about the treaties, about the ongoing struggle for sovereignty. The road has become a place for dialogue, a place where the past is not forgotten but understood. The road also connects to another monument, one that is still being carved, the Crazy Horse Memorial, just 17 miles away. That monument, dedicated to the great Lakota leader, is a response to Mount Rushmore. It is a symbol of defiance and pride. The road that leads to Crazy Horse is less traveled but equally beautiful. It winds through the same hills, past the same pines, and it carries the same sense of anticipation. Visitors who drive from Mount Rushmore to Crazy Horse often remark on the contrast, the finished faces of the presidents versus the massive form of Crazy Horse, still emerging from the granite. The two monuments, connected by the road, tell a complex story of America. In the 21st century, the road has embraced new technologies. GPS navigation now guides travelers along the route. Smartphone apps provide audio tour, describing the history of each curve and pullout. Electric cars hum silently up the grades, their batteries recharged by solar panels at the visitor center. But the road itself remains unchanged. It is still a two-lane highway, still winding through the forest, still offering that same view of the mountain. The road is a reminder that some things are better left as they are. The road also continues to inspire artists and writers. Painters set up their easels at the overlooks, capturing the light on the granite. Photographers wait for the perfect moment, when the sun sets behind the presidents and the sky turns orange and pink. Poets scribble verses on napkins in the cafe. The road is a muse, a source of creativity. It has been featured in countless films, from the 1959 classic North by Northwest to modern blockbusters. In those movies, the road is always the same, a ribbon of asphalt that leads to wonder. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the road is the sense of community it has created. Every year, the town of Keystone, just a few miles from the monument, hosts a parade along the road. Veterans march, floats decorated with flags pass by, and children wave from the curbs. The road becomes a stage, a place for celebration. And every summer evening, the road is lined with cars as visitors wait for the lighting ceremony at the monument. Strangers share picnic blankets and talk about their journeys. The road brings them together. As the years pass, the road ages gracefully. The asphalt is patched, the guardrails are replaced, the trees grow taller, but the spirit of the road endures. It is still the same road that Peter Norbeck dreamed of, the same road that the workers built with their bare hands, the same road that carried the first tourists to the mountain. It is a living monument, a testament to the power of human vision and determination. And so the road continues to carry the dreams of the past into the future. Every mile is a story, every curve a memory. The road is not just a way to get somewhere, it is a destination in itself. It is a place where the sky is wide and the mountains are tall, where the past and the present meet, where the impossible becomes real. The road that made Mount Rushmore famous is still here, waiting for the next traveler to turn the key and begin the journey. And that journey, like the road itself, is endless. And that journey, like the road itself, is endless. For every traveler who turns the key and pulls out of the driveway, there is a story waiting to be written. The road has a way of collecting those stories, of weaving them into its asphalt and stone. In the winter, when the snow falls and the road is quiet, the stories lie dormant, like seeds waiting for spring. But when the snow melts and the first tourists arrive, the stories bloom again. Consider the family from Ohio who drives west every summer with their 2 children. They have been making the trip for 10 years, ever since the children were small enough to sleep in the back seat. They know every rest stop along the way, every diner with the best pie, every stretch of road where the radio cuts out. For them, the road to Mount Rushmore is a ritual, a pilgrimage. They stop at the Norbeck Overlook, just as they always have, and take the same photograph. The children have grown, but the photograph remains the same. The 4 of them standing against the rail, the mountain in the background, their faces lit with wonder. The road has witnessed their growth, their changing hairlines, their fading baby teeth. It has been a constant in a world that changes too fast. Then there is the couple from Japan who come for their honeymoon. They have seen Mount Rushmore in magazines and movies, but nothing prepares them for the way the road leads them through the forest, the way the trees seem to part like a curtain, the way the mountain appears as if by magic. They speak little English, but they do not need words. The road speaks for itself. They stand at the overlook, holding hands, and the silence is enough. Later, they will buy a small carved buffalo at the gift shop, a souvenir of a road that brought them together in a place far from home. The road also carries the solitary traveler, the one who drives alone with a map and a camera. He is a retired teacher from New England, a man who has spent his whole life teaching history but never actually seeing it. Now in his 70s, he has decided to see the places he only read about. He drives the road slowly, taking every curve with care. He stops at the Snake Pit, which has recently reopened under new ownership, and orders a cup of coffee. The owner tells him the story of the road, of the CCC boys and the stone walls, of the years when the parking lot was empty. The teacher listens and he feels the weight of time. He takes a picture of the stone wall, knowing that his students back home would never understand why a wall is worth a photograph. But he knows. The wall is a story and the road is a book. In the summer, the road is a ribbon of life. RVs lumber up the grades, their drivers navigating the tight turns with practiced ease. Motorcycles roar past, their mirrors flashing. Cyclists in bright jerseys pedal uphill, their faces red with effort. And every now and then a convertible with the top down cruises by, the wind whipping the driver's hair. The road hums with energy. The cafes and gift shops are packed. The parking lot at the monument fills by mid-morning, and later arrivals must park along the shoulder of the road, walking the final quarter mile in the heat. But no one complains. The walk is part of the experience. The road is a stage, and every traveler is a performer. In the fall, the road transforms into a corridor of gold. The aspen and birch turn yellow, and the ponderosa pines take on a deeper green. The light is softer, the air cooler. The crowds thin, and the road becomes quiet again. This is the time of year when the locals reclaim the road. They drive it not to see the monument, but to see the leaves, to feel the season change. They stop at the overlooks not to take pictures, but to breathe. The road, for them, is a place of peace. They remember the summers of their youth, when they worked in the souvenir shops and guided tour. Now in their retirement, they drive the road with a sense of ownership. They know every pothole, every guardrail, every tree that has grown tall. The road is their history, too. Winter on the road is a different story. The snowplows run day and night, their headlights cutting through the white. The road is closed for a few weeks each year, usually in February, when the snow piles up and the winds make visibility impossible. During those closures, the road becomes a silent corridor. Deer walk along the pavement, their hooves leaving delicate tracks. Coyotes follow, their prints overlapping. The road is not a human place during those weeks. It is a wilderness. The park rangers use snowmobiles to patrol the monument, and they tell stories of seeing mountain lions on the road, their eyes glowing in the flashlight beam. The road, in winter, belongs to the animals, but when the snow melts, the road wakes up. The plows push the last drifts aside, and the first cars appear. The park rangers stand at the entrance, waving. The road is alive again, and with spring comes new construction. The pavement is resurfaced every few years, a process that requires careful planning. The road cannot be closed for long. The state contracts with local companies who work through the night. The asphalt smells of tar and dust. For a few weeks, the road is a construction zone, but the workers are careful. They know they are building on history. They try to match the original curves, the original grades. They preserve the stone walls, repairing any cracks with native rock. The road is a living thing, and it must be tended. The road also serves as a classroom. Every year, school groups come to learn about the Civilian Conservation Corps, about Peter Norbeck, about the history of the Black Hills. The students walk along the road, counting the stone walls, measuring the guardrails, sketching the bridges. They learn that the road was built with hand tools, without bulldozers, without computers. They learn that the workers camped in the forest, ate beans from a can, and slept under the stars. The road teaches them about sacrifice and pride. For some of those students, the road becomes a career. They go on to study engineering or history, and they come back to the Black Hills as adults, working for the Park Service or the State Highway Department. The road is a seed that grows, and the road is a bridge between generations. Every summer, there are reunions at the monument. Families gather from across the country, meeting on the steps of the visitor center. They hold up old photographs taken decades earlier. The children in those photographs are now grandparents. They pose again in the same spot, trying to recreate the image. The background is the same, but the people have changed. The road that connects the monument to the world is the same road their parents drove, the same road their grandparents drove. It is a thread that ties the past to the present. Some travelers come to the road with a purpose. They are runners training for a marathon. They run the road in the early morning when the air is cool and the only sound is their own breathing. They pass the overlooks, the stone walls, the bridges. They run with the mountain in their minds. Others come to paint. They set up easels along the shoulder, ignoring the occasional honk from a passing car. They capture the light at sunset, the way it turns the granite orange and red. They sell their paintings in the local galleries, and the road goes home with strangers, hung on walls in distant cities. The road is also a place of farewell. Every year, families bring the ashes of a loved one to the memorial. They scatter them from the overlook, watching the wind carry the dust into the valley. They stand in silence, remembering. The road has carried them to this moment, and it will carry them back home. The road is a witness to grief as well as joy. In recent years, the road has faced new challenges. Climate change has brought more intense wildfires, and the forest along the road has been scarred by burn. The Park Service works with firefighters to clear brush and create fire breaks. The road itself becomes a line of defense, a fire break that can stop a blaze from reaching the monument. The workers who maintain the road now wear fire-resistant suits. They carry water tanks in their trucks. The road is not just a path, it is a shield, and the road is a symbol of resilience. After the wildfires, the forest regrows. The blackened trunks stand as skeletons, but new green shoots push up from the soil. The road, too, heals. The asphalt is replaced, the guardrails are straightened, the signs are repainted. Within a few years, the road looks the same as it always did. The scars are hidden, but they are there. They are part of the road's history. The road has also become a canvas for public art. In 2020, a local artist painted a mural on the side of the old Snake Pit building. The mural shows a buffalo galloping across the plains, with Mount Rushmore in the background. It is a bold image, a statement about the relationship between the land and the monument. Tourists stop to take pictures of the mural, and the artist has become a local celebrity. The road is not just a way to get somewhere, it is a gallery. As the road approaches its centennial, there are plans for a celebration. The state is organizing a parade, a concert, a reenactment of the first drive. Old cars will be brought in, the same models that Peter Norbeck would have driven. Volunteers will dress in period costumes. The road will be closed for the day, and only foot traffic will be allowed. It will be a day of remembering, a day of honoring the road that made Mount Rushmore famous. But even after the centennial, the road will continue to evolve. New technologies will change the way we travel. Self-driving cars may navigate the curves without a human hand. Drones may fly overhead, capturing footage for virtual tour. But the road itself will remain. It will still be a two-lane highway, still winding through the forest, still offering that same view of the mountain. The road is a lesson in permanence. Reminds us that some things are worth preserving, not because they are efficient, but because they are beautiful. And so, as the sun sets over the Black Hills and the last tourists drive away, the road goes quiet. The lights from the monument flicker on, illuminating the faces of the presidents. The road lies still, waiting. It has been a long day. It has carried thousands of travelers, each with their own story. It has held them, guided them, shown them the way, and tomorrow it will do it all over again. The road is patient. It knows that the journey never ends. It knows that every traveler who leaves will eventually return, or that another traveler will take their place. The road is a circle, a loop, a thread that connects all the dreams and hopes of those who travel it. And as I sit here writing this story, I realize that I too am a traveler on that road. I have driven it myself many years ago, and I remember the way the mountain appeared through the trees. I remember the feeling of awe. That feeling is what the road gives us, and it is why the road will never fade. It is not just asphalt and stone. It is a moment of wonder, a breath of pure air, and that moment for every traveler is endless. Yet even as I say that, I know that the road does not end there. It continues, winding through the lives of those who travel it, and each journey leaves a mark. I think of a man I met once, a retired schoolteacher from Nebraska. He drove to Mount Rushmore every year on the anniversary of his wife's death. He told me that she had loved the road, loved the way it curled through the forest like a ribbon. They had driven it together for 30 years. After she passed, he drove it alone. He would park at the same overlook, the one where she had taken a photograph of a deer crossing the pavement. He would sit on the stone wall and watch the light change. He said the road was the only place he could still hear her voice. For him, the road was a shrine. And there was the young couple from Chicago who got engaged at the summit. They had driven through the night, afraid of missing the sunrise. They arrived just as the first light hit the mountain. The man had hidden the ring in the glove compartment. He proposed on the overlook with the presidents watching. They sent me a photograph later, the two of them standing on the road, arms around each other, the mountain behind them. The road had been the stage for their new beginning. I keep that photograph in my notebook. The road also hears confessions. I spoke with a park ranger who had worked the visitor center for 20 years. She told me about the travelers who would stop, not for directions, but to talk. They would stand at the information desk, their eyes wet, and tell her about a recent loss, a divorce, a diagnosis. They had come to the road to find themselves. The road, she said, was a place where people could be honest. The mountain did not judge. The trees did not interrupt. The road simply listened. And then after they had spoken, they would get back in their cars and continue, lighter than before. The road has its own weather. The Black Hills are known for sudden storms. I remember one afternoon when the sky turned green and the wind came in gusts. Rain hammered the pavement, and hail bounced off the guardrails. The road became a river. Tourists pulled over, their windshield wipers useless. They sat in their cars, watching the water rise, and then, as quickly as it came, the storm passed. The sun broke through and steam rose from the asphalt. The road dried in minutes. The travelers stepped out, laughing, shaking off the fear. The road had held them safe. In winter, the road becomes a test of nerve. I recall a story from a local newspaper about a delivery driver who tried to make it through a blizzard. His truck slid off the road near the Norbeck Overlook. He spent the night in the cab, wrapped in his coat, listening to the wind. At dawn, a snowplow found him. The driver said he had never been so cold, but he also said he had never felt so alive. He had watched the stars through the windshield, alone with the mountain. The road gave him that gift. The road is also a place of small kindnesses. Flat tires are common on the sharp curves. Travelers stop to help strangers change tires. They share water, snacks, maps. I saw a woman from Texas give her spare jacket to a shivering child from Minnesota. The child's family had lost their luggage. Road brings out the best in people. It is a reminder that we are all on the same journey, and then there is the road at night. After the last car leaves, the road is silent except for the wind. The stars are bright, unbroken by city lights. The mountain looms in the dark, the faces barely visible. Some people come to the road at night to escape. They park and turn off their headlights. They sit in the dark, breathing the pine air. I met a veteran who did that every year on the anniversary of his deployment. He said the road was the only place where he could feel peace. The mountain, he said, never asked him to talk about the war. The road has also been a lifeline for the local economy. Motels, restaurants, gas stations, gift shops all depend on the travelers who drive that road. The road is a river of commerce. In summer, the parking lots are full. In winter, they are empty. But the locals know the road will never abandon them. They have built their lives around its rhythm. The road provides jobs, stability, a reason to stay in the Black Hills. Without the road, the towns would wither. The road is the heart of the region's economy. I think of the road's future. Electric cars will one day replace the gasoline engines. The hum of tires will be softer. The air will smell less of exhaust. But the road will remain. It will adapt. The stone walls will still stand. The bridges will still arch over streams. The curves will still challenge the driver. The road is older than the cars that travel it, and it will outlast them. As I write these final words, I imagine the road stretching ahead, empty and waiting. The sun is setting over the Black Hills, and the mountain is glowing. A lone car appears, its headlights cutting through the dusk. The driver is someone I have never met, someone who will have their own story. The road will welcome them. It will carry them to the monument, and then it will carry them home. And that moment, that endless moment of wonder, will be passed on just as it was passed to me. The road is a thread, and we are all woven into it. The road that made Mount Rushmore famous will never stop being famous because it is not just a road. It is a doorway to awe, and that awe is the only thing that lasts.